Welcome to another edition of Sports Insider on cleveland.com. I'm Dan Labbe. He is Chris Fedor. And as always, got a packed show. We're going to talk Browns with Mary Kay Cabot. We're going to talk some Indians with Zack Meisel. And then we're going to talk some Cavaliers with this guy standing over to my right. He will go from host to guest at around 11:50. But first, let's get right to it. Let's bring in our Browns beat reporter, Mary Kay Cabot, joining us here. Mary Kay, how are you?
I'm great, guys. How you doing?
Doing well, and we are going to have the Johnny-Manziel era officially starting on Sunday against the Cincinnati Bengals. A lot of expectations, obviously, around Manziel. A much-hyped draft pick, but still a rookie, Mary Kay, still making his first start. What do you think is a reasonable expectation for him?
Well, you know what? I think they'll keep things reasonably simple for him. They'll tailor a game plan to what he does well. They will ask him the plays that he feels most comfortable with. And they will try to do the things that they can do to make him look good. Now, there are some other issues going on the offense, so they're going to have to hope that they can run the ball. And you know that the Bengals are going to try to take that away and see what Johnny football can do. And, you know, Josh Gordon's going to have to be at his best. And, you know, there's a lot of guys that are going to have to step up their play around him.
Mary Kay, in your opinion, had Josh Gordon caught that pass at the end of the game, would we have still made a quarterback switch?
You know what? Maybe not. I think it's hard to make a case for that if you would have won the game. I'm saying no. Josh Gordon catches that ball. I think Brian Hoyer's still the quarterback.
How is this decision going in the locker room? Are the players okay with it? I know at one time the locker room was very pro-Hoyer.
Well, you know, I think it was, you know, I don't want to say divided in such a way that it makes it seem like they were at odds with each other. But I think, you know, I think there were half the guys that if you took a secret poll, half the guys would have said, hey, let's stick with Brian. I think there's a whole other segment of the locker room that's very, very excited and has been about Johnny Manziel and what he brings to the table. So I think they're fine. I think they're embracing him. I think they're excited. I think everybody, especially guys on defense, are looking forward to maybe the offense picking it up a little bit and carrying their weight.
Mary Kay, it's been 13 games. We've seen Brian Hoyer run a little bit of kind of what we saw in the preseason with Manziel. He's been in the pistol. He's worked out of the shotgun, but obviously you're not going to have some of those read option elements and things like that. How much can the Browns adjust their offense after pretty much running this offense around Brian Hoyer for 13 weeks?
Oh, they can adjust. You know what? They're going to adjust. They're not going to make Johnny Manziel try to be Brian Hoyer. They're not going to make him stand back there and and not use his legs to make some plays. And even when the play is called a certain way, let's all realize that Johnny Manziel is going to occasionally take off and run with the football anyway. So it's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. I think he will play well. I think we will see a few mistakes here and there. After all, his center will be only starting his second NFL game. So there may be a few mess-ups in the snap exchange, but you know what? I think he'll be able to overcome those as long as they don't turn the ball over too many times. That's what this offense has got to stop doing. 1 touchdown pass, 8 interceptions over the last 4 games.
Mary Kay, yesterday Mike Pettin said that it's not a one-way street. He could see a scenario going back to Brian Hoyer. Do you see a scenario where the Browns go back to Brian?
Yeah, you know what? I was kind of glad that he said that in a way because I think people always have a tendency to treat quarterbacks like they are fine china, and that that they're just too fragile emotionally to handle all the things that go on in the NFL and in a football game. And I think that's ridiculous. I think that these guys are professionals, and if for some reason, let's just say for some reason that Johnny Manziel, goes out there and he can't cut it, and he just is not ready for this yet. If that's the case and they have to go back to Brian, then they will do it. And Brian will gladly step back in there. So, you know what? Anything can happen. And then, of course, there's the injury factor, too. If Johnny's going to be running around all over the place like that, there is a chance that, he might have to come out for a period of time. So Brian will stay ready, and anything can still happen.
Mary Kay, I don't think anything could have prepared Browns fans for Manziel better than what they saw in Buffalo. He leads an 80-yard touchdown drive, and then the very next series, he fumbles the snap. Now, it ended up being an incomplete pass, but originally it was a fumble that Buffalo recovered in the end zone. Is that sort of the kind of inconsistency we can expect on Sunday, that Johnny-Manziel giveth and Johnny-Manziel taketh away?
You know what? I think, like I said, I do think that there will be a few of those kind of plays. I don't think it's going to be a seamless transition from the bench into the game against the first-place Bengals and a very good, aggressive defense is going to be coming after them. The other thing to consider, everybody wants to get a shot in on Johnny-Manziel. There's extra motivation for defensive guys. I've seen it even in the preseason. Everybody wants to get that. And then he's going to have to stay within himself. I mean, we saw him flip the bird in Washington. So, no matter what comes his way, these guys are going to try to get in his head. They're going to try to get him off of his game. He's going to have to tune out all the noise and do the best he can to stay focused on this game.
When it comes to Josh Gordon, Mary Kay, he had a tough game last week, obviously. It didn't seem like him and Brian were on the same page in a lot of the route combinations. When it comes to Gordon, how can the Browns continue to keep him involved and continue to keep him in the game?
Well, you know what it is? He was not around for 10 weeks. And I remember, the year that Braylon Edwards suffered a foot injury in training camp and missed all of training camp when Dante Stallworth stepped on his foot. He wasn't the same that year, and he had caught 16 touchdown passes a year before. When you miss that much time, it makes a difference. Not only that, he doesn't know the new offense. This is all brand new to him. So he's kind of guessing some of the time. I would say half of the time, he doesn't really understand exactly where he's supposed to be. And, now you're going to have a quarterback in Johnny that, might not be absolutely precise and perfect on the play call, and you're going to have a receiver that might not always get it either. So it's going to be interesting. But you know what? If Josh just goes and runs down the field and Johnny extends the play with his feet and runs around and buys a little bit of time and finds Josh, I think they'll be fine.
Mary Kay Cabot with us here on Sports Insider. Mary Kay, you look at the Bengals. The Browns beat them up pretty well a few weeks ago in Cincinnati. What's different about this Cincinnati Bengals team this week?
Well, Andy Dalton has been playing better at times, but he's very streaky. And you know what? I'm still not feeling it for him against the Browns. I think they're going to harass him. I think they're going to give him a really hard time again. And I think they're going to, shut him down again the same way that they did. And I think that it's a great matchup between Joe Hayden and A.J. Green. I think that the Browns secondary is playing lights out right now. And I think they're going to do a good job against these receivers. So once again, I think you're going to see a great defensive performance. And now I think they might have some offense to go with it.
All right, Mary Kay Cabot, have you made a pick in this game yet? Have you decided where you're going? Because we were talking about this on Browns Insider last night with Tom and Branson. We couldn't decide. None of us could really decide if we were going to pick the Bengals or the Browns on Sunday. I wonder if you're leaning one way right now.
I'm leaning towards the Browns for the reasons that I just said, and that is I think you're going to get another good defensive performance with takeaways by the defense, a pick or two, maybe a forced fumble or something. They got a little bit of motivation for Jeremy Hill this week, so I think you'll get those takeaways, and I think you'll have a little spark on offense, so I'm picking the Browns.
All right, Mary Kay, thanks for the time.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Chris, we were kind of discussing it. And, obviously, we all remember what happened back on November 6th.
Yep.
But the Bengals are a different team. They're a streaky team, obviously. Andy Dalton has been pretty good after losses this season. It's really difficult to get a read on this game. Plus, you have the factor of Johnny-Manziel making his first start. Who knows what you expect out of him?
Yeah.
This is a tough game to pick.
Yeah, I think, Dan, it comes a lot down to the Browns' defense.
Yeah.
And I think the Browns' defense knows how to attack Andy Dalton. I think the Browns' defense knows how to contain A.J. Green, contain that Bengals running game. And I think the way that the Browns' defense has played in the last month, I give the Browns the edge, thinking that Johnny-Manziel is going to make a couple of plays along the lines that change the game just enough on offense, the plays that Brian could not make the last couple of weeks. I think Johnny's going to make those, and I think the Browns win a close one.
On the flip side, though, Johnny's going to make some mistakes.
Oh,
they're going to leave you just scratching your head.
Of course.
That could give some of those touchdowns he creates right back to the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's go ahead and switch gears now and bring in part of our Indians reporting team, Zack Meisel, joining us. Zack, how are you?
I'm good. I thought this was the Johnny-Manziel hotline.
Well, all right, let's talk about Johnny-Manziel, Zach. What are you expecting out of the guy?
You know, I was asked this earlier today. I honestly have no idea. It's such an unknown commodity, and we don't really know. We got a tiny, tiny taste of it against Buffalo a couple weeks ago, but I don't know that there's anything he could do or could not do that would surprise me just because of all the hype and it's such an unknown commodity.
It's so funny that you say that, Zach, because I think that's, number one, what makes him so fascinating, but that's also what makes him so maddening to his own team. They don't really know what to expect from Johnny-Manziel. His personality on the field is unpredictable. He just does what he wants to do. He goes Johnny football. Off the field, he's the same way. He's just like it off the field with his unpredictable nature, so you don't know what to expect from this guy. The one thing I do know, that Zach, about Johnny-Manziel, when the lights are shining the brightest, my man shows up.
Yeah, and he'll have the attention of most of the country on Sunday. And it was interesting to me in Berea yesterday, just Manziel and Hoyer and Pettin, they entertain reporters. They know what questions are coming usually. Rarely is there an instance in where they're blindsided by something they're not expecting. But when all three of those guys, or when Hoyer and Pettin were asked, how do you expect Manziel to perform on Sunday, or what do you expect him to do? It took him a couple seconds to kind of think about it and realize that that's an impossible question to answer at this point. I have no idea what he's going to do, or what he's capable of.
All right, Zach, let's go ahead and talk some Indians, and let's talk about the guy that they brought in, Brandon Moss, acquired in a trade with the A's. They really didn't give up much to get him. Gives them a little pop, still a guy that hits on the left side, but how much better is this lineup if Brandon Moss is in it and he's recovered from that hip injury?
Yeah, and the health is key. He maintains that he's going to start running in about a month, and he should be a little behind the eight ball come spring training, but both he and Chris Antonetti said there's no reason why he won't be ready come opening day. The lineup is better. I think the Indians still have to figure out exactly where he fits, how he'll fit, whether it'll be in right field at DH, if he'll share time at first base with Carlos Santana. There's no question he's going to be possibly the greatest power source in this lineup now. He ranks 9th in the league in home runs or at-bats per home run over the last 3 years. His slugging percentage over the last 3 years is 15th in baseball. And the Indians don't have that kind of power. Carlos Santana can give it to you in spurts. Michael Brantley gave it to you a little bit. Jan Gomes can give it to you a little bit. This is a guy where power is his game, and he's not Mark Reynolds. He's not going to strike out 200 times a season and hit 190 and give you 25 home runs. This is a guy who, even hitting in Oakland, which is one of the worst parks in baseball for offense, he was able to hit 25, 30 home runs a season. So I think you slot him in there somewhere in the 4 or 5 range in that lineup, and he's going to be quite a power source if he's healthy.
Zach, I'm looking at the lineup, and I'm looking at where he might be slotted into, and it seems like there's a guy in his way and sometimes multiple guys in his way. So with him coming in here, does that mean that somebody's going to go, and who's the most likely candidate to be moved in terms of David Murphy, Nick Swisher, Carlos Santana, Lonnie Chisenhall, all those guys that could occupy that same space?
Yeah, and there's quite a glut there. There are a lot of guys. And look, the Indians would love Christmas to come, someone take Nick Swisher's contract off their hands, and they'll give up whatever they have to do to get rid of Nick Swisher. That's not going to happen, though, unless there's a Christmas miracle. So they're pretty much stuck with Swisher, Santana, and Moss as occupying the first base, right field, and DH spots. That means David Murphy and Ryan Rayburn don't have much of a spot. You probably have to part with one of those guys, which isn't a big deal. Both can be free agents at the end of the 2015 season. There's probably a better market for that just because it's just a one-year commitment. Some team would probably take on their contracts and not give up much in return. Those guys would be easy to move. Swisher obviously would be the dream scenario. And the Indians are still looking for some pitching too. So you could see a move with Murphy or someone as part of a package for a starting pitcher.
Speaking of this lineup, Zach, they certainly have some pieces. They've got some pop with adding Moss, Santana, Gomes, guys like that. They have a guy, Mr. Consistent, in Michael Brantley. They're still missing some things, though, unless Michael Bourne has some kind of resurrection and can stay healthy next year and give them something at the leadoff spot. It seems like they're still missing a little speed at the top of the lineup. Do you think they can find that somewhere?
No, unless it comes from Bourne's legs themselves. The Indians are kind of pigeonholed here because they're stuck with the contracts of Bourne and Swisher and Kipnis, and I think they're really going to have to count on those guys rebounding. I think the lineup can be good even if you take last year's production and you add Brandon Moss, you add, another year of development for Yan Gomes and some of the young guys. If Michael Bourne resembles anything like of the guy he was in the National League where he stole 50 bases a season, he doesn't have to do that, but if he could steal 30 bases or get on base at a 330 clip instead of a 310 clip, or if Nick Swisher can hit 260 instead of 210, it doesn't have to be huge resurrections, but if the Indians can get anything from guys like Bourne, Swisher, Kipnis, anything to trump their 2014 production, the Indians lineup is going to be one of the best in the league.
Okay, and you talk about the pitching rotation. That has been a strength of this team recently. It certainly was a strength last year once they finally got things figured out. Is there a chance that they add to that, or are they good with what they have going in, do you think?
The Indians are trying to add another starting pitcher. I think they're not stupid. I think they know that there's a lot of regression in baseball, and in the second half, Carlos Carrasco put together 10 incredible starts. Corey Kluber was phenomenal and won the Cy Young Award. Salazar, Bauer, TJ House, those guys had better second halves, but there's always an injury. There's always someone who has a disappointing season. The Indians banked on Justin Masterson being their ace, and look how that turned out. So pitching is kind of fickle and unpredictable, and I think the Indians want to add a veteran-type starting pitcher who can give them 30 starts and be somewhat consistent. Probably not someone in the top half of that rotation just because they don't really have the prospects they want to part with for someone they can acquire. They don't have the money to sign some $20 million a year guy like a Max Scherzer or someone like that. So I think the Indians are definitely in the hunt for a middle-of-the-rotation type, someone who can give them some insurance just in case one of those young kids doesn't have the year they're hoping.
Zach, there has been so much conversation about Francisco Lindor and when he's going to arrive at the big league level. It seems like Terry Francona is not going to let it happen at the beginning of this upcoming season. When it comes to him in particular, is it more about the Indians not thinking that he's ready, or are the Indians just happy with what they have at that spot?
Well, I think everyone in the world wants Francisco Lindor to come up, seize that shortstop position in spring training and run with it. But it doesn't really happen that way. And he just turned 21 years old. He's still a baby. The Indians would be in better financial position for the future if they wait a little bit on him. And he only played 30 games at AAA. So he definitely has – it wouldn't hurt for him to spend a little more time down there. I'm sure he'll get a lot more playing time in spring training with the big boys this spring. So I think they want to couple that with another couple months at AAA, and then hopefully he comes in the middle of the season and helps a playoff push. I think that would be their ideal scenario. And Jose Ramirez was really good down the stretch for the Indians. When they traded Asdrubal Cabrera and he stepped in at shortstop, it was almost like they realized that they had a bowling ball that was playing at shortstop before that, because Ramirez showed what major league range is, and he showed what a major league glove can be. So, he held his own in the number 2 spot in the lineup too. So they like what Jose Ramirez brings. The question is, what becomes of him when Lindor is eventually called up, or if Ramirez is hitting 300 in June, do you still call up Lindor? There are some questions there. I think those will kind of work themselves out the way that most things do in baseball. So I wouldn't expect to see Lindor in April when the Indians open the season in Houston, but crazier things have happened, and they say that this kid is so talented that I don't think it's out of the question for him to seize a starting spot.
Zach, the rest of the division is also out there making moves. Detroit, you think it's better today, trading with Boston to get Yoenis Cespedes. You've got Zamarja with the White Sox. They also went out and got a closer. this division is being aggressive right now.
Yeah, and the thing you have to think of is with the imbalanced schedule in baseball, and you play everyone in your division 19 times, the White Sox are leaps and bounds better than they were a year ago. The Royals one win away from winning the World Series. The Tigers are still the Tigers. These teams are going to beat up on each other. So you may not have a 95-win team just because you have to go through this gauntlet in the AL Central, which means you may not have teams fighting for the wild card. You may be lucky to survive and win 87, 88 games, which is going to make it tougher to make the playoffs just because the wild card, you're usually going to need 88 to 90 wins. So I think the improvements by everyone else in the division is going to make it tougher for this division to get more than one team into the playoffs. So that'll definitely be something to keep your eye on come next year.
Dan mentioned the move by the Tigers today. Tigers, Red Sox pull off that deal. Cespedes, Porcello. Zach, which player would you rather have in that deal?
Probably Porcello. I think Cespedes is a guy who's not a real high on base guy. He's got a really strong arm, has some power, but you know, guys like that are easier to find. Porcello had a really nice year. He was Scherzer is their ace, or was their ace last year, but Porcello was probably the most consistent pitcher, and a guy that gets a lot of ground balls. So if you have an adequate defense behind you, he's going to excel, and he'll probably do that in Boston. And the Tigers really needed a guy like that. And if they lose Scherzer, there's so much pressure on Justin Verlander to become the Justin Verlander of old. And if he doesn't, the Tigers' window of contention closes that much quicker.
All right, Zach, thanks for the time.
You bet, guys. Anytime.
All right, so that was Zach Meisel joining us to talk a little Indians baseball, and now we're going to talk Cavaliers and bring in our next guest, Chris Fedor.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me today.
How's it going, Chris? Thanks
Great,
for coming
bud.
on the show.
No
it's great
problem.
to have you on. We're going
Yeah.
to talk a little Cavaliers because they have a big game tonight. Oklahoma City, probably their biggest test so far this season. Oklahoma City is healthy now. They're starting to play well. Durant is back. Westbrook is back. We're going to kind of get to see where this Cavaliers team is with another team that a lot of people expect to contend.
Yeah, and it's a tough place to play.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. You go to Oklahoma City and you know what you're going to expect. Oklahoma City has won 8 games so far this year, 5 of those at home. Oklahoma City has won 3 straight games. Like you mentioned, they are playing so much better. Westbrook's played really, really well. Kevin Durant, he's kind of given that spark. He's not the same guy yet, I don't think, that he was last year when he won the MVP, but everybody knows what he's capable of, and this kind of matchup is one that I get fascinated by because this is the kind of team where if you get in a 7-game series, they almost match you at every spot. Kevin Love, Serge Ibaka. I'll give the edge to Kevin Love and the Cavs, but where Oklahoma City is strong, the Cavs are strong. Where the Cavs are weak, Oklahoma City is weak. So it's all about which big three is going to step up and play better and which team is going to get the help coming off the bench, which has been a problem for the Cavs. So I always think this is a fascinating matchup because they're built the same kind of way. And
there aren't a lot of guys in the league, obviously, that can go point for point with LeBron James.
Right.
They can do everything LeBron James can do. Kevin Durant is kind of that guy.
Yep.
And obviously he was the MVP last year, has been making a case for the MVP for years and years. He's never quite gotten over that hump and gotten a championship yet. But I'm with you. This is a fascinating matchup.
Yeah.
And I kind of look at how those two approach ends of games as well. Durant is a guy that takes over with his scoring. LeBron, a guy, can do that, but a lot of times will kind of put the onus on other guys as well with his passing. So that's an interesting kind of contrast, I think, between the two teams.
And it's a good thing that the Cavs are getting this kind of test. I love that the Cavs are getting all these little tests throughout the year. And it's only December.
Yeah.
Everybody understands that. You can't win a championship in December. You don't want to peak in December. But, you know, they lose to Washington. They get pushed around by Washington, smacked, play a terrible game. Then they come back against that same Washington team, and they do the things that Washington did to them.
Yep.
And then you talk about avenging the loss against Toronto. There have been these little tests along the way for the Cavs, and it's good to have those in December so that you're ready when the playoffs roll around. You've seen the things that you need to see. You've had the tests that you need to have.
And you've seen how your guys respond to certain
right.
situations as well, especially with Toronto playing them so often early in the year. It kind of feels a little bit like a series. You do something to them, they do something back, you counter that move. That's good for this basketball team.
And you know, Dan, the other thing is this 8-game winning streak that the Cavs have going, which is the longest in the Eastern Conference this year. It's not like they're just beating the New York Knicks and the Orlando Magic and some of these bad teams in the Eastern Conference. You're talking about Toronto's twice in this winning streak, Washington's in this winning streak, a tough Milwaukee team, a feisty Milwaukee team, a team in Milwaukee that's better than a lot of people expected. So this is a strong winning streak.
But this is also why you want to be in the Eastern Conference. Because when you talk about playing the best teams in the East, you're talking about Toronto, you're talking about Washington, you're talking about good teams, not great teams. You start talking about the best teams in the West, you're talking OKC, you're talking Portland, San Antonio, the Clippers. Cavs and the Big Three have to be very happy that they are in the Eastern Conference right now, and they get that big Western Conference test tonight. Let's talk about Andrei Karolinko. Is he a guy that the Cavaliers would have an interest in, and a guy that they could get?
Well, there are a couple of things here, Dan. When it comes to Karolinko, he's going to get traded to Philadelphia, and then Philadelphia is probably going to buy him out. It's just a cash-cutting move for the Brooklyn Nets. And this is something that I have heard that Andrei Karolinko has wanted. He wants out of Brooklyn. He doesn't want to play anywhere right now because he's got some personal things going on in his own life. I believe his wife is pregnant right now. And the Cavs have shown interest in Karolinko, and they've had conversations about him, but they know where he stands. And there's a chance that he doesn't even play this year for the rest of the year. When he gets bought out by Philadelphia, he becomes a free agent. He's going to wait to see what happens in his own personal life. So now you're talking February, maybe even March, that whole Ray Allen type thing. And that's if he wants to come back to the NBA. If he does want to come back to the NBA and play this year for a chance at a championship, then you're talking about the Cavs being in competition with San Antonio. San Antonio's going to have an interest in Andrei Karolinko. The Los Angeles Clippers are going to have an interest in him. But I would think that the Cavs would have an inside track because, number one, David Griffin, the GM of the Cavs, has been checking in on him to see his kind of availability, to see if he'd be willing to play here in Cleveland. And, of course, David Blatt. You can't rule that out. David Blatt coached him for the Russian national team in 2012, so there's that kind of relationship. And I think it would be a big get to get Karolinko on this team because he can block some shots, he can defend a little bit. And some of the things that the Cavs have had problems with so far this year, keeping guys out of the paint, blocking shots, and that spot that was supposed to be Sean Marion's coming off the bench to help out LeBron-James and boost the bench, that's not the same anymore because Marion's now in the starting lineup. So you'd have somebody that could finally back up LeBron. Again, if Karolinko does want to play this year, which is really up in the air right now.
Dion Waiters. He says buckets don't lie. He's getting those buckets now in these last couple of games. Is he finally kind of embracing that role off the bench and thriving in that role?
Hard for me to say that because we've seen these kinds of flashes with Dion, and my biggest problem with Dion has been inconsistency. And if you go back, you know, he had 20 points against Denver on November 17th, and you're thinking, okay, well, now he's got it. That was shortly after he talked about being the sixth man and adjusting to his role and getting comfortable in that new role. And then after going for 20 against Denver, he goes through a 9-game stretch where he averages 5 points per game, and he shoots 30%. So it's a little bit too early for me to say, yeah, he's back because of what he did against Brooklyn and what he did against Toronto. It would be great if he is back because he's a huge piece of this team, and if he can find a way to adjust to that sixth-man role or seventh-man role, it makes the Cavs even more and more dangerous because going into the last couple of games, the Cavs bench has been the lowest scoring bench in the NBA, and if you put him on that bench and you can pencil in 14 to 16 points, 12 to 16 points, all of a sudden the Cavs are just even more dangerous. But I'm not ready to say he's back because he's still too inconsistent for my taste.
Cavs Thunder tonight, you'll have the live chat, I'm assuming, and then your 5 observations right after, all at cleveland.com/Cavs. And, of course, Joe Varden and Chris Haynes will also have stuff all around that game tonight. Cavs' biggest test of the year, at least since they played San Antonio earlier this year at home. So we'll see how this goes in front of a national TV audience, the Cavs and Thunder. Chris Fedor, thanks for joining us here on the show. It was great to have you.
Me, Dan.
I'm Dan Labbe, and that's another edition of Sports Insider. Thanks for watching.